Hello, friends. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. I am here once again, bright and early. I just keep getting up earlier and earlier the hotter it gets, trying to avoid the sun. I found myself getting up at like 1 a.m. just so I can sit even inside without the sun blaring down on the earth. It's getting a lot for me, but I am here and I wanted to discuss in a little bit more depth chapters 42, 43, and 44 of Dark World Light Work. And those were Postmortem, Post-Vetum, and The Great Reset. If you remember, chapter 41 was called Near Death, and in that chapter, I experienced the death of a loved one from a spiritual perspective. I was nowhere near the incident, but I did pick the entire thing up in real time as it was happening from hundreds of miles away. In Mortem, I find out about this death in real time. And then in Post-Vetum, it's about how I handled that trauma as well as all of the other traumas that were compiling in my life without the opportunity or the space or the time to stop to process, grieve, or even think about any of this. It's really remarkable when you have that level of trauma that is reoccurring and you do not have the time to stop and process it. The human body, spirit, form develops this ability to do all of that on the fly. So you can grieve, you can learn, you can grow, you can process, you can do all of it while you continue to move. And so from that perspective, it was a soul awakening journey to have been able to experience something that we all experience, which is death, from such a poetic perspective. And if you read the entire thing, and again in context, you will see that it is unbelievably poetic. And I consider it to be a gift to have been able to experience such a tragedy, because this person didn't just die, they were murdered. And still to be able to see the grace and the poetry in it is just remarkable to me. And I hope it's just as remarkable to you when you read it. The next chapter after that is called The Great Reset. And that is about me dealing with the COVID lockdowns. During Postmortem and Post-Vetum, I was staying with a friend. By the time The Great Reset comes along, I was back living in a car for about a month. And the story that I tell, that I read the passage from, was kind of amazing, because that day when I pulled into the parking lot, there were a few cars in the parking lot. And a few was enough when I pulled in. But then after I walked up to the business and looked inside and it was empty, when I turned around and looked at the parking lot, I was like, oh my God, there's only a few cars in this parking lot in the middle of a business day. And it was funny to me. I was like, oh wow, this is really shut down. And I had not been paying attention to any sort of media whatsoever. Every once in a while, I'd turn on the radio to get like a newscast, a weather forecast, or the traffic, and I'd hear them talking about this disease, but they were talking about it like, hey, they canceled Coachella this year. That's big. They wouldn't be serious about this virus if they didn't start canceling things. Like, it was almost like, do you care yet? And I kept thinking like, no, nobody cares. Like, nobody was talking about it. Nobody cared. Then once they started shutting down businesses, people were terrified, but they weren't terrified of the virus. They were terrified of their livelihood being threatened. So the media threatens you with your life being threatened. And then the government threatens your livelihood. And the average human being, modern human, doesn't realize the difference between a threat on life and a threat on livelihood, because they're intertwined. They're so deeply intertwined. For me, it wasn't, because I'd already had my livelihood taken from me. And it was really fascinating to be able to witness the COVID lockdowns from the outside looking in. And without the influence of media, I was able to really see the whole thing for what it was. You know, the disease part was very real. And then the spectacle surrounding it, along with the lockdown, along with all the, the restrictions and everything, that was orchestrated, much like the 2016 election and much like a lot of stuff that's going on in the media right now. And so that's really fascinating, the perspective. And I think that chapter is probably the most interesting chapter of the whole book, just because it happened just very recently. And my perspective is so wildly different than most people's. And it's really, really interesting. And I hope that you get a chance to read it. And I will come back to you to read from chapters 43, 44, and 45 very soon. I love you. Bye. I'm trying to make the video shorter than 5 minutes. That's why I got to stop doing that, but soon. Love you.